On this episode of Behind the Mic with Nick Morgasen, we sit down with Brooklyn's own Neil Sedaka. And that area is actually kind of famous because there's a lot of big-time musicians that have come from that area. So Neil and I sit down and we talk about a host of different topics, and eventually we get to the point where now he's roughly 60 years in, and he's still performing today with all his classic hits. Now let's go behind the mic with Neil Sedaka.
So I can see on your website that you have a new CD called The Real Neil that you have recently released. And on it, there was a new song, Beginning to Breathe Again, that I had a chance to listen to. It seems different from your typical music style. Can you share with us your story behind the song?
Well, I think the reason I've been around for 58 years, Nick, is I always try to raise the bar and reinvent Neil Sedaka. It's a very emotional song. It could be applied to many different situations. The end of a relationship, someone starting a new life, a new job, someone who's come through a difficult health issue, and they start to relive their life. They're not happy with their life thus far, and they want to really be the real person that they are. And I'm getting a sensational reaction from so many different people around the world.
So success came very early to you in your career. Hits like Laurel Lee, Ring a Rockin', and Oh Delilah made it on to the pop charts. How did it feel to hear your songs on the radio earlier in your career?
Nobody remembers those songs. I can't believe you mentioned those songs. They weren't. They were. I don't think they made the charts, but Dick Clark had me on with some of them. But what was the question? I'm sorry.
Well, talking about your hits like Laurel Lee or Ring a Rockin' and Oh Delilah made it to. I think they made it to the charts. How did it feel to hear your songs on the radio for the first time?
I'll never forget Murray the K and Alan Freed and Bruce Morrow. The first time I heard them heard my songs on the radio, I almost fainted. I used to have a 1959 Chevy Impala convertible, and riding down Kings Highway in Brooklyn, New York, I would turn up the radio so everybody on the street would hear it loud. And I think it was The Diary was the first record, and then Oh Carol was the next big hit. But I was very fortunate. I had 10 top 10 records in a row between 1958 and 1963.
So now as you moved on in your career, at 13 you met Howard Greenfield. What effect did he have on your career?
He was a marvelous lyricist. I was 13 when I started. He was a 16-year-old poet. We lived in the same building in New York, Brooklyn, New York, Brighton Beach. And our first songs were recorded by the Atlantic group, Clyde McPhatter and Laverne Baker. And then Connie Francis did the first big ones, Stupid Cupid and Where the Boys Are. And he was a marvelous lyricist. He is greatly missed. He passed away a couple of weeks before his 50th birthday, and he was just a great. He was his hero was Lawrence Hart, who wrote with Richard Rodgers, and you could hear the greatness in his lyrics, and he lives on every time I sing him.
Moving on, as you moved your family to Britain in the early 70s, what was going on at the time that caused you to make the decision to move?
My career was over. It seemed over at 1963. The English Rolling Stones and Beatles came in, and the solo American singer was out of style. So in England, they had a great respect for the original American rock and rollers. So I went over to England and started in small clubs and met Elton John, who was starting a record company. And he turned out to be a big fan of my early records, and he put me on his new record company, Rocket Records, in 1975. And Laughter in the Rain was one of my new songs then, and it was a hit first in England, and then it came to America. So after about 13 years of being off the charts, I was number one again.
So in addition to performing, you also had one of your songs, Love Will Keep Us Together, become a big hit for the Captain and to Neil. Did you know they were going to put a tribute to you at the end of their recording?
No, it was a spontaneous thing by Toni to Neil. At the end of the record session, she decided to sing Sedaka's Back. And I had an album then called Sedaka's Back. And it was a great year for me. But that was a beautiful song. The way the production was absolutely marvelous. That was her husband, Dara Dragon. And it was a Grammy Award for me.
And then you recorded two versions of Breaking Up Is Hard to Do, one in 1962 and the other in 1975. What was your inspiration to re-record the song in 1975 with a different style?
I had a friend, Lenny Welch, who had a #1 called Since I Fell for You. And he asked me if I had a ballad to follow it up. And I was fooling around at the piano one day, and I discovered that Breaking Up Is Hard to Do worked equally as well as a ballad. And he loved it. He recorded it. It was like a top 30 and R&B hit. And then I put it in my concerts as an encore. And it went over so well that I decided to record it. And I think I'm one of the few that had #1 twice in two different tempos with the same song.
So in 1980, you recorded Should Have Never Let You Go with your daughter, Dara. How did you feel to record with your daughter, and what is she doing now?
Dara was a great singer. She was 16 years old, and it was one of the few father and daughter hits, #1 on adult contemporary and number 19 in the pop charts. And as recently as just a few months ago, I met Aretha Franklin, and she said, "What happened to your daughter? She had a magnificent voice." Unfortunately, Dara had stage fright and didn't want to continue. But I did a couple of duets with her. The biggest one was Should Have Never Let You Go.
I knew you grew up in Brooklyn, as you said before. What was it like growing up in the Brooklyn in the 40s, and what are some of your fondest memories?
Well, you never had to lock your door. After World War II, times were very peaceful. Neighbors dropped in for coffee and cake. We didn't have crime. We didn't have terrorists. We played paddle tennis with a wooden paddle over a net in the Brighton Beach baths, and it was a marvelous time in music, and the culture of the time was very naive but very real, and very happy times.
You also, going back to Elton John for a moment, you recorded Steppin' Out with Elton John doing background vocals. What was the story behind that song?
Well, the bigger one was Bad Blood, where Elton sang the background. That was #1. He wanted to do a duet with me, and he was nice enough to come into the studio and put a background vocal. So I guess I had the most expensive background singer in history. Elton John sang on Bad Blood and Steppin' Out, and they were both hits, but Bad Blood was the bigger of the two. That was a great thrill because he's a great guy and a great vocalist.
Do you still get the same thrill from performing live that you used to get when you first started out?
Absolutely. You have that same adrenaline rush from the audience. It's like it's a natural high. It's like getting a shot of adrenaline. It's a wonderful feeling, and I've been doing this for 58 years, so I bring back memories for people. And then I also have a new album. I do a couple of songs from the new album called The Real Neil, and I'm going to plug it. It's available on iTunes and Amazon and my website. And I'm very proud. It's all new songs.
I'd like to thank Neil Sedaka for spending time with me today and remind everybody, as he said, Neil's new CD will be available from his website, neilsedaka.com. Thanks, Neil, for joining us.
Well, thank you, Nick. Nice talking to you.